Hello, this is Future and I'm here to bring you another StarCraft 2 netcast. Today we have a Terran versus Terran from the Dreamhack Valencia 2012 finals, and this is going to be between LiquidTaeja and MilleniumForGG. If you haven't seen game number 1 or game number 2, please go ahead and check that out first, as this is game number 3, and I don't want you to miss any of the action. But if you're still around, I'm going to assume you have, and we're going to go ahead and jump in and introduce these players. Spawning down here in the bottom left-hand corner of Daybreak, we have the blue Terran player representing Team Liquid. His name is LiquidTaeja. He is currently down 0-2 in this best of 5 series, but he is often touted as one of the best Terrans in the world right now. We're going to see if he can live up to that title and make some kind of glorious 3-0 comeback against his opponent. Spawning up here in the top right-hand corner of Daybreak as the red Terran player, currently up 2-0, representing Team Millennium, is going to be MilleniumForGG, an ex-Brood War player and a very aggressive Terran. We're going to see what he has in store for us in this game, as you know, he has just been really dominating Taeja in those last 2 games with some really magnificent play. Game number 1 being very close, but game number 2 really just 4GG got that very strong positioning over outside of Taeja's base and really just secured that advantage. So I'm really curious to see what he has planned for us in game number 3. Now, moving into game number 3, I have to say, even though it looks like 4GG is likely going for just some kind of a 1-Rax expansion, you know, I have to say, this is actually the time that 4GG can kind of afford to just go ahead and throw down 2 proxy barracks, you know, somewhere around over here at the third of Taeja, and just kind of go all cheesy all in on him. Because, you know, he's up 2 games, it is the finals, but look at this, actually Taeja thinking the same thing, scouting around very diligently, and actually 4GG doing the same, as both these players don't actually want to deal with any of that kind of cheese play from their opponent. But I mean, 4GG can afford to go for some kind of wonky build in this game and just try and get lucky. I mean, he can go ahead and say, hey, you know what, I just have to make sure that my opponent maybe doesn't account for this build, this kind of weird build that you don't often see, but you know, it's strong if you don't scout it out properly, you make a little mistake. And then he can basically, he just wins. He wins the entire best of 5 series. So, you know, I'd like to see something like that out of 4GG, but at the same time, I mean, if he just plays super standard, he's shown that he can actually take on a LiquidTaeja in those super standard TVTs. And hey, there's no harm in just continuing to do it and saying, hey, you know what? I managed to take 2 games off of you playing super standard in the past 2 games. You know, I have a 100% win rate doing that. Why not just continue to do it? And hey, as long as I win 1 more of those next 3 super standard games, I got this. And hopefully you guys don't actually hear the giant alarm going off in the background, as I guess like one of the cars is completely just being broken into or something. But you know, no big deal, as there isn't a whole lot of action going on just quite yet. We do see that 4GG just going ahead and plopping down that factory, getting those 2 gas geysers up, just producing a couple of Marines just for a defensive position to even get up that bunker, put those Marines in so that, you know, he doesn't take too much damage. And meanwhile, we actually see Taeja delaying that expansion once again and actually going for that Banshee play one more time. And we've actually seen Taeja really like that Banshee style of play, and we actually don't see a Banshee out on the map just quite yet, just getting that cloak, and probably going to hit some kind of timing where the Banshee finishes up with cloak. But you know, I'm actually not sure how much I like this, as 4GG has just been showing that he has been capable of dealing with that Banshee aggression every single game. And you know, this game, it's going to be very difficult to say whether or not he's going to be able to defend against it, as we see that the Banshee is going to be coming out in about 30 seconds, but has plenty of time for this starport to finish up, and then he has all the time to build that Viking, as you know, the Banshee makes its way across this map, and Daybreak is definitely not a small map. It's going to take quite a bit of time for that Banshee to make it over to 4GG's expansion or his main even. You know, the one advantage that Taeja does have is that he has this Hellion, actually not opting to run in there, but does actually just make sure, hey, my opponent did expand. This isn't some kind of fake out bunker, so, you know, very important to get that scouting information. But here we do see the Banshee making its way across the map, and the Vikings starting for ForGG, as well as even having these 4 Marines out. You know, he's going to be able to delay that Banshee for at least a little bit before it can rack out too many kills. And, you know, we're also going to see that these command centers are going to be starting to build up some of that energy. We do see that even this command center starting to save up some of that energy, as that Banshee is going to be rearing its head over here. And now we do see the Banshee making its way, getting 1 or 2 kills. It looks like just 2 kills for now. Going to go ahead and make his way into the main, but he's going to be greeted by a lot of those Marines. But the Viking does pop out. He's going to be able to plop down a scan once that Viking gets right on top of this Banshee. And, you know, this Banshee's gonna have to be very careful. He's actually running straight over the bunker, and I don't agree with that decision. There, it does get taken out by these Marines and that bunker. So, wow, ForGG really just not allowing that Banshee to do a whole lot of damage. And I feel like that is actually just a mistake by Taeja, as, you know, Taeja, you know, he wasn't doing a terrible job with that Banshee. He was picking off a couple of SCVs, but running it over that bunker, I feel like that was just really not the best decision. Even this, or actually I believe it was that command center that did end up plopping down that their scan over there that took out that initial Banshee. And we do end up seeing another scan going down as that second Banshee is out, trying to do a little bit of damage. He does end up netting 2 kills, but honestly, 4 total kills, or actually 6 total kills, as he might have actually killed off some scouting SCVs and such. But, you know, I feel like that wasn't entirely worth it. And now he has to deal with ForGG moving out across the map. You know, he invested so heavily in those 2 Banshees and that cloak. That does mean he's going to be a little bit behind in that army supply. But, you know, at the same time, he does actually have this Banshee doing some nice damage as ForGG tries to make his way across the map. These 2 Vikings should be able to plop down a scan and potentially take out that Banshee. But no, it doesn't end up getting, as that Banshee does make its way back over to safety for a little bit. But at the same time, with this bunker down and actually the second Banshee over here, I feel like Taeja is going to be just fine against this little aggression that ForGG is trying to put on. But, you know, the nice thing for ForGG is that he's going to secure whatever tech path he decides to go for while all this is going on. He does want to be careful with that Banshee, though. Taeja cannot afford to lose it right now. Does end up actually getting scanned down and, oh, just barely surviving with 2 hit points. That Banshee is flying with fire in the cockpit, and, you know, he doesn't give a damn. He's just going to go ahead and heal back up by repair from that SCV, and I think it's a very wise decision. But again, ForGG was able to keep Taeja back with those Banshees, able to stop him from being able to do a whole lot of aggression, even though, yeah, you know, he could have actually done a little bit of additional harassment with this Banshee over here. Now actually going to go ahead and send him over to that natural expansion and see what damage he can do as those Marines are trying to move across the map, and they will arrive probably just in time to actually defend against this Banshee. But, you know, this game is starting to look like it's evening out just a little bit. The work count is relatively similar, but actually ForGG a little bit behind. At the same time, LiquidTaeja losing that other Banshee, and that's going to be a little bit of a loss for him, although he did manage to kill 2 or 3 SCVs, so not a terrible trade at this point. But, I mean, you know, this game is looking relatively even. I feel like, you know, Taeja does have a slight worker advantage, that slight economic advantage, but at the same time, ForGG kind of has that army advantage. He has that Raven out, he has 4 Vikings out in comparison to, I guess, well, actually, it looks like Taeja also has 4 Vikings and a Raven out as well. And actually, even the Hellion count, dead even, but, you know, I guess the main advantage in terms of army that ForGG does have is going to be in actually those Marine counts. But we do see a big engagement going on. That's actually going to secure the Hellion count advantage for ForGG, as he managed to take out all but 1 of those Hellions out on the map for Taeja. So really nicely played by ForGG, able to really seize that map control, as those Hellions are going to be able to make their way across the map, able to seize control of the Zelnaga towers. We're going to see what he's going to be able to do with that map control. Probably just going to go ahead and check around to see, has my opponent taken a third, get a little bit of scouting information, and in the meanwhile, go ahead and build up this Viking siege tank count. As you know, having control of the siege tank count as well as having control of the Viking count is so critical in this matchup. As you know, having control of the siege tank count means that you have the stronger army, you can have the stronger positioning, and having more Vikings also means that you have the air control. That means that your siege tanks can go ahead and fire on your opponents without utilizing those scans. You can utilize all of that energy on your command centers to just crank out all those mules. And we do see actually Taeja building up a very scary force of Vikings and even that Banshee mixed in. So he's going to be able to do some nice harassment if he doesn't manage to seize control of the air. But at the same time, we see ForGG with an equally scary siege or Viking Raven army taking out that barracks. It's going to stop any factory production. Not that I feel like it's going to actually cause a huge amount of concern for Taeja at this point, as he was already producing that second starport. But yeah, this game looking to be relatively passive up until this point, as we do see, and now ForGG starting to make his way across the map. Does have a very, very scary army of these Hellions, Marines, and Siege Tanks, as well as those Vikings. And, you know, we do see actually ForGG getting the first shots off with the Vikings. That's actually very, very important. The Raven throwing down that point defense drone. And now he's actually going to be able to, you know, soak up some of those Viking units. But now we do see a big engagement over here. And ForGG forced to actually siege up over here as he tries to take out these blocks, as he cannot afford to try and move up against this choke. As you know, LiquidTaeja does have those siege tanks siege up in a very nice position. It's going to really delay ForGG from being able to move up. We do see actually ForGG siege up a couple of siege tanks of his own. The Hellions getting in there and doing a lot of damage. And I feel like with these Vikings landing, that Taeja is actually going to be able to secure a really nice position over here, but unfortunately ends up losing quite a few of those Vikings, and now the Vikings of ForGG landing on top of the Vikings of Taeja, but at the same time, Taeja's siege tank count is just a little bit too high, and he manages to clean up that army, still keeping alive 3 very, very red Vikings of his own. He's going to be able to secure that high ground positioning, and oh my god, it looks like LiquidTaeja is going to be able to be in a relatively decent position to actually clean up this army. And what can ForGG do? He actually needs to land, or unsiege and leave, but no, doesn't actually manage to do it in time. These Vikings end up cleaning up the remainder of those siege tanks, and Taeja seizing control of this match by just a little bit. You know, just the fact that he has 5 siege tanks in comparison to the 3 siege tanks of ForGG, that small little lead is going to work out very much in his favor. He also has that 1-1 now completed in comparison to ForGG's 0-0. ForGG really not even starting those upgrades, so this is actually going to be very, very problematic as they move into the later stages of this game. We do see, though, that the Viking upgrades is going to be sitting at 0-0 for LiquidTaeja, and, you know, actually 0-0 also for ForGG, but ForGG, actually no, sorry, it looks like LiquidTaeja being the one actually researching those upgrades for those siege tanks, those +2/+2 upgrades, and wow, actually ForGG just continuing to try and do a little bit more aggression, moving out across the map with these Hellions, with these siege tanks, and these Vikings. And I'm not sure how much I agree with this, as you know, he has the smaller army at this point. Both these players trying to seize that 3rd expansion. And, you know, that's going to work out relatively well for him, and Taeja even plopping down that scan, seeing that that 3rd expansion is down. But here we see some fantastically positioned siege tanks, going to be able to clean up all of those Hellions. They do end up taking out 1 or 2 of those mules, so nice little play from ForGG. But well-placed siege tanks do end up stopping that Hellion harassment without too much of a concern. But yeah, it looks like actually ForGG going for that early 4th expansion in comparison to LiquidTaeja, as LiquidTaeja does have that 4th expansion building, but we don't actually end up seeing him going ahead and trying to take it just quite yet. He's probably going to be in a slightly more defensive stance until he can seize control of the center. As we have seen, the only time that ForGG ended up actually trying to secure this 4th expansion was when all of these siege tanks and these Hellions were moving around across the map, when he knew that his opponent's army wasn't about to barrel down and start taking it out. But now we do see LiquidTaeja moving out with all of his army, and now he will actually be able to have a chance to secure this 4th expansion. Now the Hellions also moving around for LiquidTaeja. We're going to see how much they're going to be able to do in terms of scouting to see what ForGG is up to, as both these players are once again just kind of playing a slightly more passive game, building up those armies. And we do see actually the Hellion count starting to get a little bit out of control for ForGG, up to 17 Hellions and not stopping that production, now up to 19. And in the meanwhile, his siege tank count is going to be sitting at 11. And, you know, Taeja also doing the same. He's also really just pumping all of those Hellions, pumping those siege tanks, slightly just down by 1 siege tank in that siege tank count, but you know, it's not going to be a huge concern, as he does have an insane number of unit producing structures. He does have 5 factories producing either Hellions or siege tanks, and that's definitely going to work out in his favor. As we can see over here, actually a big engagement over here. The siege tanks for LiquidTaeja siege up barely actually just maybe in a good position, but the Hellions doing so much damage, and actually you don't often see this, but Hellions cleaning up all the remaining siege tanks of LiquidTaeja, and that's actually going to work out so well with the Hellions for LiquidTaeja coming in, unable to do as much damage as they might want to, as all the siege tanks for ForGG are still alive. There are still 5 siege tanks, and that's going to really cause some trouble. But we do see a Banshee coming out, being able to do some good damage to those siege tanks, and actually able to potentially start picking off some of these siege tanks. And wow, even the Hellions of the LiquidTaeja able to come in and do some really nice damage. The Viking landing, and wow, what an insane engagement. I did not expect actually Taeja to come out on top in that big engagement, but he does have actually 2 Banshees out and 2 Thors actually being in production for ForGG. But are they going to come out in time? He needs to have some kind of anti-air to these Banshees. These Banshees are basically just zoning ForGG from being able to deal any kind of damage to this army of LiquidTaeja. Now we do see 1 siege tank sieging up for Taeja, able to do some good splash damage to these Hellions, but unfortunately for ForGG, I'm not sure if it's going to be enough with these Hellions. As you know, he still does have these 2 Banshees. The Banshees actually do get taken out by that Thor with the repair, so really nicely played by ForGG, securing that air control, or at least stopping LiquidTaeja from securing that air control. Now we do see that Taeja is going to be in a rough position, but, you know, trying to siege up this expansion. But at the same time, what does ForGG have to deal with this, as he does end up forcing a liftoff on that 4th expansion. But here come 2 little Vikings just to put on a little tiny bit of pressure on that 4th expansion, and now he's gonna have to go ahead and retreat that. Does want to make sure he doesn't lose it. Needs to actually start repairing it, potentially with some of these SCVs that are actually still mining. And oh no, he cannot afford to lose this 4th expansion, as you know, Taeja is already mining heavily off of this 4th expansion. He's going to be very far behind, as he is already down in that army supply, and if he falls behind economically as well, that's going to be really, really terrible. Oh my god, that expansion cannot afford to go down, but at the same time, he is so busy dealing with this giant army from LiquidTaeja sieging up over at his natural expansion, able to take out that Thor, and there we see the GG coming out from ForGG. So LiquidTaeja able to secure one of these games in this best of 5 series, bringing the series of 1-2, so he's starting to make his comeback. He's starting to go for that reverse all kill. And we're going to see whether or not he's going to be capable of doing it in game number 4. I'm just excited to see who's going to win the game number 4, and I will see you guys